Welcome to The Criminologist, the podcast dedicated to educating and entertaining our listeners. We bring you subject matter experts from around the world and share the latest and greatest evidence-based practices and interventions to help individuals desist from a life of crime and delinquency. This podcast avoids stereotypes and biases in favor of the lived experiences of those we can best learn from. Now, please welcome the host of The Criminologist, Joseph Arvidsson.
Hello, and welcome to episode 103 of the Criminologist Podcast. Happy to have you all with us today. To say that I am excited to be talking with my next guest is an understatement. I grew my social capital by connecting with Professor Ioan Durnescu not too long ago, and it has been an amazing journey ever since. I initially reached out to Ioan to inquire as to getting a copy of his book, which we will be discussing today in detail. And lo and behold, I eventually opened my mailbox one day, and to my delight, I discovered my signed copy of Core Correctional Skills, the training kit. Since then, I have had the honor of training alongside Professor Durnescu, and that relationship has led to so many other great opportunities and the chance to continue to build my social and human capital. And dare I say, yes, I have undergone some identity transformation along the way. A great example of practicing what we preach. Recall from Dissonance theory, it's all about growing one's social capital and undergoing identity transformation. And I can tell you the formula certainly worked for me. This is a great episode for those of you looking to up your skill set and to better serve your justice-involved clients. A little bit about our very special guest today. Dr. Ioan Durnescu is a professor at the University of Bucharest in Romania, teaching in their sociology and social work departments. He teaches and conducts research in the area of probation and prison, with a special interest in comparative probation. He is one of the editors of Probation and Europe, as well as Understanding Penal Practice. Ioan is also co-editor of the European Journal of Probation. He is a member of a number of prestigious organizations, including the Confederation of European Probation, and he's also vice president of the Collegium of Social Workers in Romania. Please enjoy my conversation with my friend, Professor Ioan Durnescu, and I will see you all on the other side. Well, hello, and why don't we start off, Ioan, by you telling us just a little bit about yourself, maybe tell our listeners about your current role, and then we can take a deeper dive into some of your past, present, and future projects. But give our audience just a taste of what you're doing now and some of the steps educationally and vocationally that you've had along the way on your journey.
Yes. Hi, Joe. Thank you for having me today. It's a great pleasure to be here. I'm following your podcast for quite a while now, and I'm very happy that I will be in one of them. So again, thank you. A little bit about myself. Yes, I'm Ioan Durnescu. I'm professor at the University of Bucharest, Romania. I was not always an academic. I started my career as a prison inspector more than 20 years ago. And then I moved into the probation area, and I worked as a probation inspector and later on as a director of the probation department within the Ministry of Justice, Romania. And then since 2006, I'm working as I said, as a professor at the University of Bucharest. teaching and conducting research in prison and probation issues, methods and techniques working with offenders, comparative probation, community sanctions and measures, working with radicalized offenders, and so on. Apart from that, I'm also a co-editor of European Probation Journal, and I'm quite active in consultancy. I really love this sort of work, cooperating with colleagues from Jordan, Kenya, and many other countries.
That is fantastic. You and I recently had the honor of training at the first international training school on core correctional skills in the beautiful city of Barcelona. 5 fantastic days with students from all over Europe, eager to learn. So tell us, what was your motivation behind launching the training school?
Well, I think my main motivation is, of course, within the university context, and also in the consultancy context. I did quite a lot of training in many countries, and every time I had to prepare a training, I had to search for training materials, for inspiration, for different methods and techniques, and on how to deliver this training as well as possible. And unfortunately, I was not always able to find relevant material and relevant structure. And therefore, I decided a few years ago to write a book, Core Correctional Skills, the training kit. And based on that book, actually, we decided to organize the International Training School for Core Correctional Skills. We started, as you said, last year in Barcelona, based on a very solid partnership together with the Center for Legal Resources in Barcelona, with the University of Barcelona, with Confederation of European Probation, CEP. And the purpose of this school is first to update and upgrade the skills of the probation officers, or of the correctional officers, I would say, not only for probation, but also for prison, especially treatment staff in prison. And also to refresh their knowledge and skills, so in general, their competencies, to facilitate also international cooperation, to facilitate correctional officers from different contexts, from different jurisdictions, to come together and discuss about concrete issues, concrete practices that they develop, or they would like to develop. And also to facilitate the meeting between different trainers coming from different traditions, let's say. So I was very happy to see you from United States, and happy to see other people from Spain and from England, from Romania. So it was quite an interesting mix of trainers, a fantastic mix of trainees, based on a book. But that was just the starting point for very elaborate discussions and debates, role plays, lectures, and so on.
I know for me, speaking as an evidence-based practice trainer, yes, that was the experience of a lifetime, meeting, as you said, other evidence-based practice trainers from around the world, and also students from all over Europe who really opened my eyes to some different cultural aspects of their jobs. One of the things that I tell people that I really enjoyed being over there was that, on the one hand, these core correctional skills are somewhat universal, and we're going to get into just what they are in a moment here. But there was also sort of a slightly different twist to it, if you will. It reminded me, I don't know if this will land on folks, but if they remember Quentin Tarantino's movie Pulp Fiction, the scene where John Travolta and Samuel L. Jackson are talking about Burger Kings in France, and they say, well, it's mostly the same foods, but slightly different. They don't have the quarter pounder with cheese. They call it the Royale with cheese. So it was kind of like that. They do motivational interviewing. They do cognitive skills, but with a slightly different twist. So for me, that was one of my biggest takeaways. What was some of your positive experiences, or again, biggest takeaways from your experience from that inaugural school?
Well, I have to agree with you. I think we all talk about core correctional skills, but when it comes to practicing these core correctional skills, things get more quite different from one jurisdiction to another, and that was one of the main takeaways. Let's say another takeaway for me was the kind of enthusiasm and motivation and interest of the correctional staff participating at this school to learn more and to test their limits and to expand their kind of competence and to become better and to test and to try different methods and techniques, different tactics, or these kind of things. It was really fascinating to see that in this kind of environment, we learn a lot, not only from the trainers, but also from the trainees. So it was a mutual process of learning from each other, and that was really fantastic and really motivated me to continue this year as well, and hopefully in the future.
Could not agree more about that observation. Correct. It was almost as if you were conducting what we refer to as a community of practice, where it was more of a knowledge exchange at times than simply you or I or some of the other speakers lecturing and merely providing information. Again, it was a very, very collaborative effort. You noted this already, that the training school follows your fantastic book entitled Core Correctional Skills, the Training Kit. Let's talk about the book, starting perhaps with maybe just give an overview of the themes which you cover, what you refer to again as core correctional skills.
Yes, the book is looking at the main correctional skills that are involved in the correctional work, and of course the selection of these skills is based on past literature, past research conducted in different countries like United States, Canada, Australia, England, Jersey, Romania, and so on. And of course, we took into account quite extensively different meta-analysis and systematic reviews that actually identified and located these skills as being central to any evidence-based practice in the correctional field. So we had this as a selection. We had how to build up the working alliance, pro-social modeling, problem solving, motivational interviewing, and cognitive interventions. Those are the most important 5 skills that a correctional officer needs to have in order to start being effective in reducing reoffending and promoting desistance. This is something else that I try to do in my book, to try to encourage a more intensive dialogue between RNR, between risk needs responsivity model and the desistance literature that is more and more convincing that social capital, identity, agency, hope, and so on are also very, very important when it comes to effectiveness.
Yeah, again, could not agree more. And to that end, let me ask, one thing I noticed when I was over there training was, and you just went through the list of sort of those core themes, which for an American practitioner trained under the risk need responsivity model would recognize these and say, yeah, this lines up pretty much with, again, what we do under the RNR framework. Again, cognitive skills, motivational interviewing, the therapeutic alliance. Yet I distinctly remember one day when I was speaking to the class and I asked, simply by a show of hands, who's familiar with risk needs responsivity principles, and there was only a smattering of hands that went in the air. So again, I don't know if that's maybe you mentioned sort of that marriage we're trying to create between risk, need, responsivity, and desistance. But again, to me, that was sort of fascinating that they're aware of and practicing these core skills, but not necessarily aligning them as we do under the R&R framework.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you, and I also noticed, especially in the research that we did in Romania some years ago, that sometimes, unfortunately, practitioners are not very accurate in their estimations of the use of these skills. Sometimes they feel quite confident that they use empathy quite a lot, but then when we run some systematic observations, we notice that actually that's not the case all the time, or not as often as they would like us to believe. You have a lot of situations when it's quite clear that the correctional officer understands the thoughts and the feelings of the person, of the client, but they are not always available to express back that sort of understanding. So the empathic expression and the empathic feedback is not always as it should be, as accurate and elaborate and exact and concrete as we would like it to see in practice. So this is just an example, but I can give you a lot of examples like that around motivational interviewing, around working on the criminogenic needs, and so on. I think sometimes professionals tend to overestimate their practice, and that's why these sort of training schools are quite useful, because we provided, as you know, a lot of opportunities for them to see themselves, to watch themselves. So we used quite a lot of video taping, and then they were able to see themselves, to watch themselves, and to notice if they really practice what they thought they did. And sometimes it's quite a big discrepancy between what you think you did and you actually did in practice.
Yes, I agree. Using those videos to create that cognitive dissonance, connecting what they think they're doing with the actual practice. As you were speaking, I thought to myself, it's the same here in the United States when we introduce these evidence-based practices, and I typically get the refrain, well, Joe, I'm already doing this. We're already doing this. But again, when we sort of do a deeper dive, they're not doing it as consistently or with fidelity. I use the analogy sometimes I could introduce folks, for example, to what constitutes a healthy diet, and they might recognize those foods and say, well, yeah, I'm already eating healthy. I'm drinking milk and doing this. But then if I were to actually break down what they eat every week, they would say, well, yes, I eat fruits and vegetables, but not nearly as much as I should every day. So again, they recognize these things. They assume they're doing them, but again, maybe not so much with the fidelity that we know is really, really required. You just reminded me, I love the videos taping over there with the spider. That was fantastic. Another part of the training school that was great, the feedback session. See, I know your training kit, speaking of your book, was just recently translated into Portuguese. Congratulations. Do you think, Ioan, is that reflective of the popularity and demand of this book, and by extension, a desire of more people to learn these skills around the globe?
Probably it is, to a certain extent. I think there are many reasons why some people think this book is useful, and of course, I can only be happy about that. I think first of all, the book is written in a very accessible language with a very easy to follow approach. So I think every practitioner can really read it and look at the examples, look at the exercises, they can also look at negative examples of how not to do things and so on. So I think it's quite easy to learn from this. Also alone, if you want. I mean, you don't need to be necessarily in a classroom or in a training room to learn these things. You can read about them, and via examples and other things, you can really improve your understanding and eventually your skills. And I think that was a sort of opportunity for different administrations to translate it into their kind of language in order to make it available for their staff, in order to provide more resources for learning and development, learning and growth. And I was very happy to work with the Department of Social Reintegration and the Penitentiaries in Portugal to translate this book. And we have different conversations now with other administrations to translate the book in German, in French, and so on. So yeah, it's a very interesting example of how this kind of resources can be shared. We don't need to reinvent the wheel if the wheel is out there. But this is not without challenges, I have to say, because while translating in the book in Portuguese, we had many challenges in finding the equivalent concepts in the Portuguese language. So I had many conversations with those translating the book about how to translate supervision, or how to translate empathic response, or how to translate different examples, and so on. So it's a fascinating work to domesticate the book in different cultural and institutional or legal or linguistic contexts. So yeah, it's just another challenge that I love to take.
I was about to say, you must love, if nothing else, just personally through that translation process, learning other interpretations or ways of explaining a concept. I know, again, as a trainer here, I always try to provide as much variety when I'm explaining a concept, because I know language is tricky, even when I'm training to English audiences. And if they don't understand, I think we tend to throw terms out so much in training world. We make these assumptions that, for example, when I'm training motivational interviewing, well, everybody knows what the word ambivalence means. Well, maybe not. But again, if you could explain it in different fashions, it'll land on people differently. So again, I imagine sort of a fringe benefit of going through this translation process for you is you get to learn different ways to describe these concepts. Hey, let's go ahead and continue to promote the training kit. I have my version right in front of me here in English, but if listeners want to obtain a copy of Core Correctional Skills, the training kit, what's the easiest way for them to do that? And again, Ioan, I can leave information, links, or contact information in the description of this show if that helps. But how can people reach out to you to get a copy of the training kit, or even through this program?
Yeah, absolutely. It's pretty straightforward, really. We have a website, a page available for this book. It's called Core Correctional.eu. If you go there, you can choose your version of the book that you want. It's either English or Romanian or Portuguese now. Hopefully soon we're going to have more. And then you are immediately taken to the payment page, and you can proceed with that, while also reading about the book, about some testimonials from those who use the book in their own practice, and so on. So I think it's quite easy. We have a very good shipping system whereby we can ship the book or the books everywhere around the world within a few days. So that's quite a global process now, I would say.
Yeah, I will leave that web link in the description of the podcast episode, so folks can just look at that link and click on that and get their copy. Which, to your point, global shipping, I received mine right here in Minnesota, so it was fantastic. You've already alluded to the point that you train all over Europe and beyond. What are some common themes you see when you're working with probation officers and correction officers all over the world? And are there common themes that practitioners are still struggling with?
Well, I think there are a lot of similarities really around the world. I saw many motivated and enthusiastic probation or prison officers trying to do their best to help their clients get better. I saw many examples of interesting practices. I saw many organizational cultures supporting learning and growth, while also, unfortunately, I saw organizations that are not very much, facilitating these processes. As a common theme, I think, in the last few years, it's somehow the huge pressure that is placed on the shoulders of the correctional officers in terms of, they have more and more difficult or high-risk clients. They have less and less time to work directly with their clients. They have more and more paperwork to complete. And all this actually contributes to this kind of occupational stress that I saw in many, many places, unfortunately. And that, of course, is reflected in the quality of work. And maybe we should do something about that, because if you look at the prisons, you see, if you visit a prison, exactly, you have some standards, how many beds you have, and you know how many square meters you have, and then you can figure it out how many prisoners you can accommodate. We don't have the same kind of standards, unfortunately, in the probation work. And that's why I think the probation staff is seen more like an elastic resource, working with 50, 70, 100, 150, even 250 clients in some jurisdictions, which is quite dangerous for many reasons. And that's why I think we need to do more in order to create some kind of standards of work, also in this respect, in order to prevent occupational stress, to promote excellency and performance, job satisfaction, and so on.
I'm wondering, as you were speaking and you mentioned different organizational aspects around the world, one thing that we struggle with and we're getting a handle on here in the United States is this notion of implementation science. Again, we're not necessarily reinventing the wheel when it comes to risk, need, responsivity, but we're finding now the next sort of frontier, again, is implementing these things. And we find many times that it really boils down to the organizational culture as to whether these skills actually transfer to the day-to-day practices. We have an expression here. We say culture is king. If you can train and pray and train and pray, but if you can't get a handle on that culture, again, is that a global phenomenon that you see in other jurisdictions around the world attempting to implement these core correctional skills?
Absolutely. Yeah. I think we have another expression here saying something like culture eats strategy for breakfast. Which is very much real in many jurisdictions, unfortunately. What is really bothering me is that in the last, let's say, 10 to 20 years, we made quite a lot of progress in the correctional research and in developing evidence for what we're supposed to do when working with our clients. Unfortunately, not much is implemented in practice, or it's not implemented with integrity. And this is a big issue. I mean, if like 30, 40 years ago, we had the so-called nothing works movement, nowadays we have this kind of nothing gets implemented properly. And this is something that we need to fight for. And probably we as trainers or educators, we need to change our way of doing things in order to make this training more impactful and sustainable somehow. Maybe we need to think about this training programs in a more sustainable fashion, not as one-off events or something like that, but as processes that actually continue after the person goes back to his or her office and meets his or her clients. So I think we also need to change something in this kind of technological transfer to make sure that what we discovered, what we produced as knowledge is properly trained, properly transferred to practitioners, and also properly transferred to practice, to real practice. Otherwise, our work is for nothing.
I could not agree more. And to your point about how we sort of broke through Robert Martinson's nothing works era of the 70s and experienced the birth of evidence-based practices, risk need responsivity. I feel sometimes we're almost to the point now where we got too comfortable with that and just sort of settled into like, well, we figured this out, but we almost, again, got too comfortable with it. And to your earlier point, we have that same expression here, but we've modified it to culture eats strategy for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. So we've taken it to the next level. Loyal listeners of this program will know that I love to talk about desistance from crime on this podcast. And we see more of that taking hold in Europe than in the United States. I recently returned from a fantastic trip to Scotland where they're all in on desistance. What advice would you give for those who are currently operating under the risk needs responsivity framework, but they might wish to expand a bit into desistance and desistance theory?
I think my first advice would be go and try it, go and use it. It's for some reasons we made things overly complicated, and we claim for some time that these two models are very different and it's impossible to find a way for them to work together. In my experience, I think this is not true. I think there are ways to put these two models together and even add other models like the Good Lives model and other strengths-based models. They can really add to the correctional practices. For instance, I can see RNR as very important in terms of content of the interventions. But when it comes to the delivery of the interventions, I see desistance more taking like the driving seat. So there are ways to combine them, to integrate them. And even more, I think that we also made quite a lot of progress in different lines of research around occupational culture or organizational cultures. We made quite some breakthrough into legitimacy studies. We know quite a lot about staff skills, and we learn quite a lot about trauma-informed interventions or even trauma-responsive interventions and so on. I think we need to go beyond these two block models like RNR and Desistance and incorporate all the knowledge that we have and that can really facilitate or even enhance our work with our clients, taking stock of what we know from the organizational point of view, from the skills point of view, for the systemic point of view, and so on. So I really think that it's a good time now to come up with a kind of integrated theory of rehabilitation that takes stock of all these advancements in a sort of coherent and unified way.
Dr. Ralph Serin from the University of Carleton, or Carleton University rather, up in Canada, wrote a great paper a few years back, and I may leave a link for this in the episode description as well. But it was essentially echoing your sentiments, saying, hey, listen, R&R and Desistance are not Coke, Pepsi, or they're not in competition, but rather they're 2 points on a spectrum. And again, they can coexist. I always I took that concept, and when I talk about this, and it may be an oversimplification, but I talk about I love the R&R model for examining those pathways into criminality and what we can do to lessen those pathways into criminality. But we're missing half the equation because we're not looking at Desistance, which examines those pathways out of criminality and how we can augment and accelerate those pathways out of criminality. But again, they're not in competition. The two can coexist. So like I said, I'll leave that link for Dr. Serin's paper in the description of the show so folks can read up on that. And obviously keep listening to the podcast if you want to learn more about desistance from crime. Hey, I'm very excited to announce, and I'll let you make the official announcement about your second annual International Training School on Core Correctional Skills.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great pleasure to let you know before the registration is open that we will have the second edition of the International Training School on Core Correctional Skills between 3rd and 7th of October. This will take place also in Barcelona, in the same Center for Legal Resources, a beautiful, beautiful center with great facilities. Yes, and this year, apart from looking at the core correctional skills like we did last year, updating them to 2022, we will also introduce one new subject that is quite linked to what we have discussed before, namely resilience and burnout. We really want to find a way to build up or to strengthen organizational and individual resilience while avoiding occupational stress and burnout. And we are very happy to have with us Sarah Lewis from England, who will talk to us about growth and about organizational resilience and individual resilience, how we can strengthen those. We also plan to have a publication out of that presentation. We're going to have some concrete practical guidelines on how staff and organizations can really work together to strengthen this resilience in order for correctional staff to stay well and to perform well. So that's a special kind of topic that we will introduce this year.
When you mentioned resilience and staff resilience, I always love it when any of the concepts that we train on or teach align with sort of this parallel process that, in other words, they can be applied to the clients we serve or to ourselves. For example, staff resilience aligns with, we talk a lot about resiliency in the Desistance literature. So again, I like anything that sort of breaks down this barrier of, well, we would do that with our clients, but we're not like them. And again, sort of chip away at this binary way that we too often have of thinking of those we serve. And it really instills the notion that, no, we're all human beings. These themes are universal, just like our clients need to, or would benefit, I should say, from resiliency. Our staff members would benefit from resiliency. Or I always, again, leave the comparison of, just as we want you to be empathetic and use, for example, motivational interviewing when you interact with your clients, that's how we want supervisors to interact with their staff members. Again, this is universal. It's sort of a 2-for-1 you can get out of all these things.
Absolutely. Yeah. I could not agree more. I mean, we have already quite a lot of research showing that, for instance, those practitioners who are using more empathy in their daily practice, they experience more, job satisfaction, and they perform better, and they are more resilient. So here we go. The connection between skills and resilience is really, really there. It's really evidence-based.
Yeah, I love it. I don't want to disclose too much personal information, but I was speaking with my wife, who you met, Ioan, and again, not getting too personal, but she's commented to me that, hey, we've been married a long time, and she has seen in me my own personal evolution of sort of my behaviors or outlook has changed. And I tell her it's kind of because I drink my own Kool-Aid. I mean, I practice what I preach with this kind of thing. And again, they're universal, whether it's mindfulness or, again, resiliency or any of these other themes. Who are some other great speakers that you've got lined up for this fall to maybe lure and attract some potential students to the International Training School in October?
Yes, of course, we have Fergus McNeil as a main speaker. He will come and open the school this year in Barcelona. And of course, we're going to have famous trainers and lecturers like yourself, like Sarah, like other people. that I would like still to keep as a surprise.
Okay.
But I can assure you that we have a great lineup of people with great experience and with a lot of enthusiasm to share their experience and knowledge. So please think about it, and we are waiting for you in Barcelona.
I got to scratch something off my bucket list when I got to meet finally face-to-face Fergus McNeil when I was recently in Scotland. I know you and he have collaborated together, but trust me, if people are ambivalent about attending, it's worth the price to get to Barcelona to meet Fergus. He is really one of a kind. And like you said, a lot of other great speakers over there as well. So we will continue to promote this on the show if people have interest. You mentioned registration earlier. Can you announce when registration will officially open?
Yes, absolutely. We opened the registration on the 15th of May. We are still working on the program now to make sure that we provide a very good mix of lectures, role plays, video labs, local study visits, and so on. So by the 15th of May, we will have everything ready to meet the public and welcome the potential participants. What is important to mention here is that we have only 25 seats available. We want to keep this event quite small because we want to make sure that all the participants have the chance to participate fully. We aim at developing skills, not only knowledge and understanding, and therefore we cannot work with many people at the same time. So we're going to have 25 people all together. Last year we were fully booked in 2 weeks' time after the registration was open. So think about it, and if you really want to become involved in this, be fast. Otherwise, it can be too late, unfortunately.
You mentioned the study visits, and that we should revisit that a little bit because, again, those are some of the highlights of last year's school when we got out into the community, out of the classroom. For example, we toured a prison over there in Barcelona. We toured their sort of justice center, which was their government center housing those probation and parole officers. Got to meet some fantastic probation officers from Barcelona, which for me, that is, again, where a lot of the learning takes place, in that sort of comparative justice lens, to talk to other practitioners, to see beyond the classroom X's and O's of how it looks on the chalkboard, but actually in the real world. So yeah, those are some of the other highlights of the trip for me. We're getting out into the community. And I assume you've got those types of visits lined up again for October.
Absolutely. As I mentioned, we want to make sure that we find all the good ways to transfer the learning into the real life situation. So that's why we think that the connection with practice is really important. Mm-hmm. And that's why we organize, study visits for, let's say, 2-3 hours, just to see how these competencies, how these skills are actually implemented into practice, what are the challenges, how they can be overtaken, and so on. So, yes, study visits will stay in the program. What we will change actually from last year, it's the duration of the of the training day. As you remember, our program was every day from 9 to 5 o'clock in the afternoon, and participants were really tired after 5 o'clock. They were not able to enjoy Barcelona or dinners and so on. But this year we will do it differently. We will try to finish everything at 3 o'clock, so people can rest and also make some visits and recover for the second day, for the next day. Yeah.
Well, and we should also mention, if you've never been to Barcelona, it is truly one of the most beautiful cities in Europe, if not the world. So you could take advantage of that as well. I have some lovely photographs hanging in my living room now from La Sagrada Familia that I took when I was touring that beautiful cathedral. But yeah, let's not forget, you would also get the opportunity to visit, again, one of the world's most beautiful cities. Professor Ioan Durnescu from the University of Bucharest, thank you for coming on, promoting the training school. Again, I'll leave relevant registration or links to the book in the description of the podcast, and I look forward to talking to you very soon, my friend.
Thank you very much. It was a real pleasure chatting with you. Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.
A big criminologist thank you once again to Professor Ioan Durnescu from the University of Bucharest in Romania. I should be clear in closing with Ioan. I noted that I would leave links for registration to the training school. Again, registration will not open until May 15th of 2022. However, I will leave a link for information related to purchasing the Core Correctional Skills training kit. Again, that website is corecorrectional.eu. That'll be in the description of the show. So if you would like to do a little recon, if you will, order your copy of Core Correctional Skills and get a sneak peek of the types of learning that you will also receive in Barcelona from Professor Durnescu, myself, the lovely and talented Sarah Lewis from the United Kingdom, and of course, the fantastic Fergus McNeil. Other speakers as well, but as Ioan said, we'll keep that a secret for now. In the meantime, check out the book, and again, if those speakers are familiar to you, let that serve as motivation to consider attending the school. Only 25 seats available, so you would be part of an elite group of students who are going to get this great learning opportunity in Barcelona, Spain. Back next week with a fresh episode. In the meantime, you may contact the show or reach out to us through our website, the Paragon Group, LLC.com, for training or presentations as to evidence-based practices, implementation, program design, or of course, the topic of desistance from crime. If you have questions or comments as to this podcast, feel free to contact the show via our email of thecriminologistpodcast@gmail.com. That's thecriminologistpodcast@gmail.com. Remember to follow us through our Facebook and Instagram pages at The Criminologist Podcast. New fun images are being added all the time to those feeds. You don't want to miss out. In fact, I told myself the other day, I need to start posting some of the images from my amazing trip to Scotland recently. So maybe not in real time, but I want to get that information out to you nonetheless. So there's your motivation to follow on Facebook and Instagram. The Criminologist Media Group is also on Twitter at Crim Media Group. That's CRIM Media Group. Go ahead and give us a follow. You may also connect with me or Ioan Durnescu on LinkedIn and follow both the Criminologist Podcast and the Paragon Group on our LinkedIn pages. Hey, lastly, if you've not already done so, check out and subscribe to our YouTube channel, The Criminologist, for additional content as to the themes of this program. Merchandise is available if you're interested in promoting the show and showing off your criminologist swag around the office. Simply reach out to the show for details. And if you believe in what we're doing on the program, if you're a part of the movement, please spread the word. Tell a friend or a coworker or a colleague about us. Ask them to subscribe to the podcast. And of course, do so yourself if you've not already done so. And always remember, folks, there's no them, there's only us.
The social capital, identity, agency, hope, and so on are also very, very important when it comes to effectiveness.
The Criminologist Podcast is a production of the Paragon Group, LLC. For speaking engagements, interviews, program design, or training opportunities, please visit us at theparagongroup.llc.com. If you enjoyed the show, you can find more content and videos on our YouTube channel, The Criminologist. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Both the Criminologist Podcast and the Criminologist channel are brought to you by the Criminologist Media Group. Be sure to give us a 5-star review, and thanks for listening.
The thoughts, statements, and opinions of the host and cast members do not necessarily reflect the views of their employers and are those of the host and cast themselves. Any discussion regarding client statements, behaviors, actions, or crimes are purely fictional and are used only for the purposes of example. Any examples that could be deemed to be related to an actual individual or individuals are incidental.